of you managing chronic hypoparathyroidism, the therapeutic landscape has, well, it's just shifted in a big way. A new long-acting parathyroid hormone analog, Yorvipath, is now approved. So in this quick explainer, we're going to distill the official prescribing info into a practical, no-nonsense guide to help you confidently bring this new option into your practice.
Here's our roadmap. First, we'll get to know Yorvipath and how it works. Then we'll dive right into the clinical nuts and bolts, starting treatment and the really critical steps for titration and monitoring. We'll wrap things up by covering key safety points and the efficacy data that got it across the finish line.
All right, first up, let's get acquainted. What exactly is Yorvipath? What makes this new PTH analog different? And how is it really designed to work on a physiological level?
So, Yorvipath is what's known as a prodrug. It uses some pretty clever technology to temporarily attach the active hormone PTH134 to a carrier molecule. The whole idea is that once it's in the body, it's designed to release that active PTH continuously at a really controlled rate. The goal? To mimic the steady, natural levels of PTH to get calcium and phosphate regulation back on track.
And here you can see the result of that design in action. This pharmacodynamic data shows that once you hit a steady state, Yorvipath does a great job of maintaining albumin-corrected serum calcium levels right within that target normal range over a full 24 hours. That stability is really the key to its whole therapeutic effect.
Okay, let's move from the how it works to the how to use it. How do you actually start a patient on this therapy? Because, as we know, proper patient selection and that initial counseling are absolutely fundamental.
Before you even think about writing a prescription, it is critical to screen for contraindications. I mean, the label has a boxed warning for a potential risk of osteosarcoma based on findings in rats, so it is strictly off-limits for patients at increased risk. We're talking about those with open epiphyses, bone metastases, a history of skeletal radiation, or any hereditary disorders that would predispose them to osteosarcoma.
Now, the delivery system itself is pretty slick and designed for straightforward titration. Yorvipath comes in 3 distinct color-coded pre-filled pens. Each pen covers a different dose range. You got blue for the lowest doses, orange for the mid-range, and then burgundy for the highest. This lets you move pretty seamlessly through the whole dosing spectrum as you titrate the patient up.
Patient education here is just crucial for safety. You have to emphasize that each pen is for exactly 14 days of use. After that, it gets tossed even if there's medicine left. They need to refrigerate the pens before the first use, but after that, they can be kept at room temp. And definitely advise your patients to sit or lie down for their first few injections just to mitigate any risk of orthostatic hypotension.
Okay, this next section is really the heart of managing this therapy well. We are going to walk through the very specific step-by-step titration protocol, and it's all driven by one thing: the patient's serum calcium levels.
You know, the core clinical challenge is this balancing act, adjusting the Yorvipath dose while at the same time weaning patients off their conventional therapy of calcium and active vitamin D. The good news is, the prescribing info gives us a very clear, almost algorithmic approach to guide this whole process.
So let's look at scenario 1. Your patient's albumin-corrected serum calcium comes back right in the normal range. Perfect. In this case, you don't touch the Yorvipath dose. Leave it alone. Instead, you start to back off their conventional therapy. First, you'll cut the active vitamin D dose by half, and then, in later steps, you start reducing the calcium supplements.
Okay, scenario 2. The labs show mild hypercalcemia, let's say between 10.7 and 11.9. Here, your first move is different. You reduce the Yorvipath dose by 3 micrograms. You generally don't touch the conventional therapy at this point, unless, of course, the patient has already been fully weaned off it.
And for scenario 3, serious hypercalcemia 12 or above, you have to act fast. You withhold Yorvipath immediately for 2 to 3 days. Then you recheck the serum calcium. If it's still high, you hold it for another 2 to 3 days. Only when that level drops below 12 should you resume Yorvipath, and you'll do it at a reduced dose.
This monitoring schedule is absolutely critical for patient safety. You need to check serum calcium 7 to 10 days after any dose change of Yorvipath. Once your patient is stable on a maintenance dose, then you can stretch that out to every 4 to 6 weeks.
All right, let's talk safety. Having a really clear understanding of the potential risks and adverse reactions is essential, both for counseling your patient and for your ongoing management.
The label really highlights 2 big calcium-related risks. First, serious hypercalcemia. That's most likely when you're just starting therapy or when you're increasing the dose. And second, serious hypocalcemia. with the highest risk if the drug is stopped cold turkey. This just underscores why that careful monitoring is so important and why you want to avoid stopping it abruptly.
Now, in the big Phase 3 trial, the adverse reaction profile was generally pretty manageable. The most common thing you'll see is injection site reactions, reported in about a third of patients. Other reactions that popped up more than placebo included things like vasodilatory symptoms, dizziness, headache, and of course hypercalcemia itself. Now, it's important to address this. You may have seen a recent report from the FDA's Adverse Event Reporting System, or FAERS, that mentioned a patient death. It's really important to have the full context here. The manufacturer has clarified that this patient had a very complex medical history, including cancer, and had made the decision to stop all medical therapies, including Yorvipath, to enter palliative care at least a week before they passed.
Finally, let's get to the good stuff, the efficacy data. What does the evidence show, and what does it really mean for our patients?
So, the key takeaway from the pivotal trial really boils down to this single number. This was the percentage of patients who hit the primary efficacy endpoint at 26 weeks. And that endpoint was really strict. It was a composite. Patients had to have normal serum calcium, they had to be off active vitamin D completely, and they could only need 600 milligrams or less of supplemental calcium per day. Nearly 70% of patients on Yorvipath achieved this, which is just a world away from the less than 5% on placebo. It's a striking difference that really shows its potential to slash the burden of that conventional multi-pill therapy. Finally, let's turn to a really nuanced area. What did the FDA's review have to say about using Yorvipath in patients who are pregnant or lactating?
This is where that classic risk-benefit conversation gets very real. The FDA reviewers had to carefully weigh the fact that there's no drug-specific data in pregnancy against the very serious, well-documented risks of untreated maternal hypocalcemia. And those risks are no joke. We're talking about everything from spontaneous abortion to fetal skeletal issues and even neonatal seizures.
So their solution wasn't a contraindication. It was a post-marketing requirement. Essentially, the FDA has mandated that the manufacturer conduct a big, worldwide study to prospectively gather this vital safety data on women exposed during pregnancy. It really underscores the need to fill this knowledge gap.
The guidance for lactation follows a pretty similar logic. Since there's no data on whether the drug gets into breast milk, the FDA's recommendation is very clear. If the mother's clinical need for the drug is established, then careful monitoring of the infant for signs of high or low calcium is advised, and that includes considering serum calcium checks for the baby.
So at the end of the day, seeing the why behind the label, from the patient use errors to the immunogenicity data and the risk-benefit debates that happen inside the FDA, it just provides so much deeper context. It takes you from simply reading the prescribing info to truly understanding how to bring this new therapy into your clinical practice thoughtfully and, most importantly, safely.